India is home to some of the world's finest products, yet most people don't know they originated there. In this video, we uncover the true origins of these products. Let's discover what they are, where they come from, and why they're so valuable. Pashmina. All Pashmina is a type of cashmere, but not all cashmere is Pashmina. Pashmina is the elite, highest quality grade of cashmere, sourced exclusively from the fine undercoat of Changtangi goats in the high-altitude Himalayan regions of Ladakh and Kashmir. The word Kashmir itself comes from Kashmir. This is not a coincidence or a linguistic curiosity. It is a direct reference to the origin of the most coveted natural fiber in the world. Pashmina, from the Persian word for wool, pashma, is the original cashmere, and it comes from one specific animal, the Changtangi goat, found only in the high-altitude regions of Ladakh and the surrounding Himalayan plateau. The fiber that comes from these goats is extraordinary by any measurable standard. The individual fibers of Pashmina are between 12 and 16 microns in diameter. Finer than the finest merino wool, finer than silk in terms of softness, and warm to a degree that seems physically disproportionate to the weight of the fabric. A genuine Pashmina shawl weighs under 200 grams, folds small enough to pass through a signet ring, a traditional test of authenticity still used by Kashmiri traders, and yet provides warmth equivalent to a heavy woolen jacket. The production chain from goat to finished shawl is entirely human-powered and painstakingly slow. The down is first combed from the animals in spring, then sorted by hand to remove coarser guard hairs, then spun on traditional wooden spinning wheels called charkas by women in Kashmiri households. The spinning alone requires months of practice to master. The yarn is then woven on hand looms in Srinagar by artisans who have inherited the craft across generations. A basic plain woven Pashmina shawl takes several weeks. A shawl with Sazni embroidery, the fine needlework that covers the surface of the finest Kashmiri shawls with floral and paisley patterns worked thread by thread, can take up to 3 years to complete. A fully embroidered shawl sells for upward of 2 lakh rupees. What the global market calls Kashmir is mostly produced in Mongolia and China from different breeds of goat raised at lower altitudes. This cashmere is softer than regular wool and commands a premium, but it is not Pashmina. The fibers are coarser, the warmth-to-weight ratio is lower, and the texture does not compare to genuine Ladakhi Pashmina. Most of the cashmere sold in European and American luxury stores, carrying labels that say Italian cashmere, Scottish cashmere, or simply luxury cashmere, contains no Pashmina at all. It is Mongolian or Chinese cashmere, processed in European mills and sold under a European brand name at European prices. Genuine Pashmina carries a GI tag protecting its geographic origin. There is no such thing as Pashmina from Italy. The fiber does not come from Italy. The goat does not live in Italy. The altitude is not in Italy. If a shawl says Pashmina and costs 2,000 rupees in a market stall, it is almost certainly blended with synthetic fibers. If it is the real thing, it will cost between 15,000 and 2 lakh rupees depending on its quality and embroidery. It will last decades, growing softer with wear. It is one of the most remarkable textiles produced anywhere on Earth, and it comes from Ladakh. Kashmir saffron. Kashmiri saffron is the most expensive spice cultivated in India and one of the most expensive food ingredients anywhere in the world. As of July 2026, the retail price of premium, authentic Kashmiri saffron or kasar has surged to around 5 lakh rupees per kilogram. Each saffron flower contains 3 stigmas, the thin red strands that are the actual spice. These stigmas must be harvested by hand within hours of the flower blooming because they begin to deteriorate as soon as the flower opens. The harvest window for the entire year is approximately 6 weeks. 1.5 lakh flowers, 150,000 individual blooms, are required to produce 1 single kilogram of finished saffron. Kashmiri saffron is distinct from Iranian or Spanish saffron, which together account for the majority of global production in specific ways that are measurable and certified. Kashmiri saffron has a longer, thicker stigma, a deeper color, and a higher concentration of the compounds, saffronal, crocin, and picrocrosin that give saffron its distinctive flavor, color, and aroma. These qualities are the product of the specific altitude, climate, and soil of the Pampore Plateau, which cannot be replicated elsewhere. This specificity is what earned Kashmiri saffron a geographical indication tag, making it the only saffron in the world to carry a GI certification. It can only be called Kashmiri saffron if it actually comes from Kashmir. A strand of Kashmiri saffron dropped into warm milk turns the liquid gold within minutes. It has been used in cooking, medicine, and ceremony for over 3,000 years. It is imported by Canada, the UK, and parts of the Middle East specifically as a premium ingredient that cannot be substituted. The world pays for it. The Valley of Kashmir grew it. Jasmine, sandalwood. Perfume industry's best-kept secret. The jasmine oil industry of Madurai is one of India's most invisible global supply chains. The Madurai Mali, the jasmine cultivated specifically in the region around Madurai in Tamil Nadu, has aromatic properties that perfumers describe as richer and more complex than jasmine from any other source. The French perfume industry, which supplies the luxury fragrance market of Europe and the Americas, sources a significant portion of its jasmine absolute from the farms around Madurai. Chanel, which produces the most famous perfume in history, uses this jasmine. The economics of jasmine absolute explain both why it is so expensive and why the farmers who produce the raw material see so little of the final value. A kilogram of jasmine absolute requires approximately 5 million individual flowers, each hand-picked in the hours before dawn. A family working together through a night's harvest can collect enough flowers for a fraction of a kilogram of oil. The processing, solvent extraction or enfleurage, requires specialized equipment. The final product, jasmine absolute, retails internationally at prices between $1,500 and $3,000 per kilogram. The families picking in Madurai at 3 in the morning are paid a wage that reflects their position at the beginning of a supply chain whose value accumulates entirely upstream in processing and branding and the luxury market of Paris. Mysore sandalwood occupies a similar position in the world of aromatic materials. Santalum album, the Indian sandalwood tree grown in the forests of Karnataka, produces an essential oil that is considered the finest sandalwood oil in the world. The distinctive warm, woody, creamy aroma of Indian sandalwood is chemically distinct from Australian sandalwood or other varieties, containing a higher concentration of the santalol compounds that give the oil its characteristic scent. A kilogram of Mysore sandalwood oil sells for between $1,000 and $3,000, depending on purity and source. The Mysore sandalwood industry is controlled by the Karnataka state government, which has maintained a monopoly on sandalwood harvesting since colonial times to prevent depletion of the trees. Sandalwood takes 30 to 60 years to mature to the point where its heartwood yields high-quality oil. This combination of slow growth and restricted supply has maintained sandalwood's position as one of the world's most expensive wood products. Mysore sandalwood is used in perfumery, incense, religious ceremonies, and Ayurvedic medicine. It is exported globally and appears in fragrance products that do not mention India in their branding. The forest that grew the tree that produced the oil that went into the bottle with the French name exists in Karnataka. Muga silk, the world's only natural golden silk. Muga silk is produced from the Anthoria assamensis silkworm, a wild moth that lives exclusively in the Brahmaputra Valley of Assam and feeds on the leaves of som and sohyong plants that grow naturally in that specific ecosystem. The silk it produces is, uniquely among all silks in the world, naturally golden. This is not a dye effect. It is not a finish. The golden color is inherent to the silk protein produced by this particular moth, and it deepens and intensifies with washing. The longer a Muga silk garment is worn and laundered, the richer its color becomes. No other silk on earth shares this property. Every other commercial silk, Chinese mulberry silk, Erie silk, is white or off-white and acquires color only through dyeing. Muga's natural gold cannot be reproduced artificially. Attempts to rear Antheraea assamensis outside Assam have consistently failed because the silkworm is dependent on specific plant species and specific climatic conditions that exist only in the Brahmaputra Valley. This geographic exclusivity is absolute. There is no Muga silk from anywhere other than Assam. A Muga silk mekhala chador, the traditional Assamese garment, is the most prized possession of an Assamese woman. It is worn at bihu, at weddings, at ceremonies of the highest significance. The finest pieces are embroidered with traditional Assamese patterns in contrasting silk thread, adding a layer of craft to the already remarkable base fabric. A high-quality Muga silk mekhala chador retails for between 15,000 and several lakh rupees. The GI tag protects the name, ensuring that only silk produced in Assam from the Antheraea assamensis moth can be sold as Muga. Muga has no substitute. Its golden color, its weight, its texture, its durability. These are properties of a specific biological and geographic convergence that exists in one place on Earth. The superfoods from India. Bihar, a state that has been at the center of India's civilizational history, the birthplace of Buddhism, the seat of the Mauryan Empire, home to Nalanda, produces a product that has been consumed for centuries in Indian kitchens and is now being marketed to the global health food industry as a premium superfood. Makhana, or fox nuts, harvested from lotus plants in the ponds of the Mithila region. The harvest is performed underwater by farmers who wade chest-deep into the ponds, dredge the seeds from the mud by hand, and process them through a skilled popping technique that has no mechanical equivalent. A kilogram of high-grade processed makhana sells internationally for prices that would astonish the farmers who produced it. Next time you grab a bag of fox nuts, remember the hands that brought it to your plate. Then there's moringa, often called the miracle tree. Rich in protein, vitamins, antioxidants, and minerals, its leaves have been used in Indian cuisine and Ayurveda for generations. Today, moringa powders and supplements are sold globally as one of the world's most sought-after superfoods. India is also home to turmeric, prized for its natural compound curcumin, Amla, one of the richest natural sources of vitamin C, and millets, ancient grains that are making a global comeback for their nutritional value and climate resilience. Many of these foods have nourished Indian families for centuries. Only recently has the rest of the world begun to recognize them as premium superfoods. Long before the world began talking about superfoods, India had been growing them for centuries. Kashmir hand-knotted silk carpets. These carpets are sold at Christie's and Sotheby's, collected by European, Japanese, and American buyers as investments, and stored in bank vaults. A single large carpet can sell at auction for crores. The knot density, measured in knots per square inch, on a Kashmir silk carpet is among the highest achievable by hand anywhere in the world. Antique pieces appreciate in value like art. Japanese collectors specifically fly to Srinagar. This is India's most globally prestigious luxury object. Kashmir silk carpets have a geographical indication tag. Only carpets woven in Kashmir using specific techniques can legally carry the name. The tag matters because the market for imitation Kashmir carpets, machine-made or hand-knotted in Pakistan, Iran, and China under the Kashmir label, is substantial. Kashmir silk has a specific sheen and a specific hand that no synthetic fiber matches. The Banarasi fabric. Varanasi has been a center of silk weaving since at least the 7th century CE, and its saris are described in ancient texts as among the most prized luxury goods in the subcontinent. A Banarasi sari is the meeting point of Indian technical tradition and artistic imagination, and the result is one of the world's great luxury textiles. In authentic Banarasi, the sari is made from real silver wire coated in actual gold, twisted around a silk core. The threads are woven into the fabric using a supplementary weft technique, creating a surface of controlled luster. A sari with real zari brocade has a weight and sheen that no mechanical imitation can match. The gold is heavy, the light catches it differently at every angle, and the fabric drapes with a stiff opulence that is the immediate signal of authenticity. A Banarasi sari with significant zari work takes between 15 days and 6 months to complete, with the most complex pieces taking longer still. Banarasi silk has also traveled far beyond the Ghats of Varanasi. For more than a century, its brocades have appeared at international exhibitions, inspired Western couture, and found their way onto global runways. Today, luxury fashion houses continue to reinterpret Banarasi-inspired fabrics and motifs in gowns, jackets, and accessories. Yet somewhere between the artisan's loom and the Paris runway, the name Banaras often disappears, even though the craft itself began there centuries ago. Ashwagandha. KSM66 is a branded ashwagandha root extract produced by Ixorial Biomed, based in Hyderabad. The extraction process took Ixorial 14 years to develop and uses a proprietary method based on green chemistry principles that avoids the use of alcohol or synthetic solvents, instead using milk as the processing medium, a technique rooted in the traditional Ayurvedic preparation of ashwagandha. Ashwagandha has been documented in Ayurvedic texts for over 3,000 years. Prescribed for stress, for strength, for recovery, for sleep, for the kind of deep physical and mental exhaustion that ancient physicians understood long before the word cortisol existed. Indian households have known this root for generations. The rest of the world is only now catching up. Walk into a Whole Foods in New York, a Boots pharmacy in London, or a health supplement store in Singapore, and the chances are high that any ashwagandha product on the shelf, regardless of what brand name is on the packaging, contains KSM66. Malabar black pepper. There is a single commodity that explains why the modern global economy looks the way it does. It explains why Portugal became a naval power. It explains why the Dutch East India Company became the most valuable corporation in history. It explains why the British East India Company eventually governed a subcontinent. It explains why trade routes were mapped, oceans were crossed, and wars were fought on coasts that European powers had never seen before the 15th century. That commodity was not gold. It was not silver. It was not silk. It was pepper, and it came from Kerala. The Malabar coast, the western edge of what is now Kerala, was producing black pepper for export centuries before Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and arrived at Calicut in 1498. Arab traders had been sailing to Malabar for the pepper trade since at least the 1st century CE. Roman merchants paid for it in gold. The Venetians controlled its distribution across Europe for centuries before the Portuguese decided to cut them out entirely by finding a direct sea route to the source. Vasco da Gama's journey, the voyage that is taught in every school as the beginning of the age of exploration, was, in its commercial purpose, an attempt to reach the pepper of Kerala without paying the middleman. The age of exploration was a business plan built around Malabar pepper. The reason pepper was worth this extraordinary effort was not simply scarcity, it was quality. And it was specifically the quality of what grew on the vines of the Malabar coast that made it irreplaceable in the European kitchen for centuries. Black pepper in the medieval and early modern European diet was not merely a flavoring. It was a preservative, a medicine, and a marker of wealth. A household that could afford to use Malabar pepper liberally was a household of consequence. Pepper was used in lieu of currency, accepted in payment of rent and taxes, and given as diplomatic gifts. When Alaric the Visigoth sacked Rome in 410 CE, his ransom demand included 3,000 pounds of pepper alongside gold and silver. Pepper was that valuable. Kerala grew it. What made Malabar pepper specifically, rather than pepper from other growing regions, worth this level of commercial obsession has a chemical explanation. Black pepper's heat and flavor come primarily from a compound called piperine. Malabar pepper, grown at the right altitude in Kerala's laterite soil, with the specific rainfall patterns of the Western Ghats, consistently produces piperine concentrations between 5 and 9%, among the highest measurable in any commercially grown pepper in the world. The aromatic complexity of Malabar pepper, the floral, slightly citrus, deeply woody profile that sits underneath the heat, comes from a combination of volatile compounds including saponine, pinene, and caryophyllene that are present in concentrations specific to the Malabar variety and the Malabar growing conditions. When a top chef in Paris chooses Malabar pepper over the standard pepper that comes in bulk from Brazil or Vietnam, which now supply most of the world's pepper, This is exactly what they are paying for. It is chemistry. The heat is different. The aroma is different. The way it behaves when cracked over hot food is different. Trained palates distinguish it immediately from Vietnamese pepper, which is sharper and more one-dimensional, or Brazilian pepper, which is consistent but comparatively flat. What grows in Kerala cannot be replicated anywhere else on Earth. Himalayan morels/Gucci mushrooms. Every expensive ingredient in the world is expensive for one of two reasons. Either it is extremely difficult to produce, or it is extremely difficult to find. Himalayan morels, called Gucci, harvested from the forests of Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand, fall into the second category. Mycologists have been attempting to cultivate morels commercially for decades. The results have been inconsistent, small in scale, and economically unviable at the quality level that the premium market demands. The forests of the Himalayas grow them. Nowhere else grows them the same way. No laboratory has cracked the exact code. The consequence of this is permanent, structural, absolute scarcity. The supply of Gucci does not respond to demand. It does not increase because a restaurant in Paris wants more. It does not expand because the price went up last year. It arrives in the quantities that the forest decides to produce, in the weeks that the forest decides to produce them, regardless of what anyone on the demand side of the equation requires. This is exceptionally rare in the modern food economy, where almost every premium ingredient can be cultivated, farmed, or engineered to meet demand if the price justifies it. Gucci is one of the few ingredients that genuinely cannot. The mushrooms appear in the forests of Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh in the weeks following the snowmelt, typically between March and May, depending on the elevation and the specific year's weather patterns. The window is short, sometimes only 3 to 4 weeks at a given altitude before the season closes. The foragers who collect them are mostly villagers from communities that have been reading these forests for generations. People who know which slopes to check first, which tree varieties to look near, which signs in the forest indicate that the conditions are right. They rise before dawn, move through terrain that is steep and cold and still wet from the snow, and collect the mushrooms by hand into baskets. Fresh Gucci sells at local collection points for prices that have risen sharply over the past decade as international demand has increased. The dried form, which is how almost all export Gucci reaches international markets. The mushrooms being sun-dried or gently processed to reduce their weight for transport and extend their shelf life. Sells between 30 and 50,000 rupees per kilogram in domestic wholesale markets. At the retail end of the Indian premium food market, the price is higher still. Internationally, dried Gucci commands prices equivalent to several $100s per kilogram at import, rising further at the retail and restaurant supply end of the chain. The flavor and texture that justify these prices are specific and unreproducible. Gucci has an earthy, intensely savory depth, what food scientists call high umami, combined with a slightly smoky, nutty character and a honeycomb texture that absorbs and holds sauces and braising liquids with unusual efficiency. French and Italian fine dining kitchens that have worked with Gucci describe the flavor profile as intense and complex. This is why they appear in Michelin-starred kitchens in Paris, Milan, and New York, as a serious culinary material chosen because nothing else produces the same result in the pan. Darjeeling First Flush tea. This is the most counterfeited luxury drink on earth. Most of what the world is drinking as Darjeeling tea is not Darjeeling tea. Every year between late February and mid-April, something happens in the hills of West Bengal that serious tea buyers wait for the way wine collectors wait for the Burgundy harvest. The first new leaves of the season push out from tea plants that have spent the entire winter dormant in the cold at high altitude. They last only a few weeks. This is the Darjeeling First Flush, and what it produces is unlike anything else in the world of tea. The cup is pale gold. The flavor is floral, almost orchid-like, with a clean, dry finish that tea tasters describe as spring itself in a cup. No other region produces anything like it, because the flavor is not a technique that can be copied. It is the direct product of a specific altitude, a specific mist, a specific granite soil, and a specific temperature swing between day and night that exists only in the sub-Himalayan foothills of West Bengal. You cannot grow this tea anywhere else. The name and the geography are the same thing. The estates that produce the finest first flush are known to serious buyers, the way great wine chateaux are known to collectors. Makibari, the oldest tea estate in Darjeeling, established in 1859. Castleton, Margaret's Hope, Goom Tea, each has its own flavor profile. Experienced buyers identify them blind. The buyers who understand this best are Japanese. Japanese tea importers fly physically to Darjeeling every spring for the first flush auction. Some maintain personal relationships with specific estate managers going back decades. Some have standing agreements that guarantee them the top lots before they reach open auction. At the Kolkata auction, the finest first flush from top estates has exceeded 1 lakh rupees per kilogram, wholesale, before any retail margin. Exceptional lots go higher. The Japanese do not just buy Darjeeling tea, they collect it. A first flush from a specific estate in a specific year is treated the same way they treat a rare whiskey or a vintage wine. Something singular, something that will never exist again in exactly the same form, something worth paying for honestly. Now for the fraud. The mechanism is straightforward. Blend a small quantity of genuine Darjeeling with cheaper Kenyan or Sri Lankan tea. Keep the Darjeeling label. Charge the Darjeeling price. The blend costs commodity money. It sells at premium. The consumer picking up a supermarket box has no way to know. The comparison to champagne, which the international tea trade uses constantly, is more accurate than it sounds. Champagne is legally protected across the EU and most global markets. No sparkling wine from outside the Champagne region can carry the name. Darjeeling has the same legal framework and has won the same legal battles. But champagne houses have spent decades educating consumers until the name itself triggers an expectation of the genuine article. Darjeeling has the law. It has not yet built the same consumer knowledge. That is the gap. The product is extraordinary. The legal protection exists, but the consumer does not know enough to demand the real thing. The Japanese buyers who fly to Darjeeling in February know exactly what they are looking for and why. The rest of the world is mostly drinking something else and calling it the same name. Every product covered in this video is protected or being protected by geographical indication tags. GI tags are the legal instrument through which a country or region asserts that a particular product can only genuinely come from a specific place. India has been registering GI tags at a rapidly increasing rate, and the system offers genuine protection against the most blatant forms of misrepresentation. But GI tags address only part of the problem. The deeper issue is marketing power. A GI tag protects the name. It does not protect the story. And in the global luxury market, the story is what drives the price. India does not have a shortage of extraordinary products. What India is not yet doing, at the scale required, is telling that story loudly enough and directly enough to capture the price it deserves. That is changing, slowly, but visibly. If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who still doesn't know what India makes. Like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.